So if you would start off, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your personal and professional background and help people get a better understanding of who you are.
Well, Bob, good to be here with you today. My name is Jeff Maurer, and I am the Libertarian candidate for Indiana's Secretary of State. I am a Hoosier by choice, and I live in Carmel, Indiana. My background spans finance and technology, and I manage a $300 million budget that I want to use in terms of helping the auditing protocols and implementing to create stronger elections that we can all trust.
That $300 million budget you're talking about is with what company?
That was with Columbia University, so a large nonprofit.
Interesting fact about yourself that we won't find in a bio anywhere.
Oh, good question. I like ice cream more than I let on. And so I use it as an example often, but I almost always have ice cream at home, a number of different flavors, and I know that's not the most exciting fact to reveal, but it's one of my great privileges and joys to take my dog to go get ice cream together, and I'm not sure which one of us is happier.
All right, help people understand, why are you running for Secretary of State?
I'm running for Secretary of State because as an entrepreneur, I can see a problem. I can see that we've lost trust in our elections. We can look at 2016 and 2020 and how the losers in each of those elections have said the elections were stolen or rigged. It's a failure of the process. It's a failure of our trust in the elections, and we can solve that. We can solve that with good common sense solutions of audits and receipts, and with my background in finance, I know how to bring those solutions and implement them.
So I assume we're probably going to have a little bit of a theme here, but my next question is, if elected Secretary of State, what is your top priority and what will you be working to accomplish first?
This election is an opportunity to rebuild trust in our elections, and that's going to come from these common sense solutions, audits, and receipts. That has to be our priority. That is my priority. And so the way to implement that is we each need a receipt for our vote so that we can track it just like a package. And then we need a complete, comprehensive, and independent audit of all 92 counties so that way we can prove to ourselves that our elections are operating correctly the way that we designed them.
How can Indiana improve its elections, and what role does the Secretary of State play in that?
Sure. So the Secretary of State is the chief elections officer of the state, and it is true that the elections are administered by our elections experts who are our 92 county clerks. So it's going to be working closely with our clerk community and with all of our poll workers and election staff, but also with the General Assembly and the Governor's office to constantly improve the laws that guide our elections. But right now, where my focus are on audits and receipts, giving us the transparency and trust to see that our votes have been counted and that no other votes have been cast in our names or in anyone else's names.
Are Indiana elections secure?
Our elections are secure, but we don't know. And that's what the audit will show. And where we should get credit for processes that are good, we just saw, so where we should get credit where processes are good, and we should work immediately to fix areas and strengthen areas where we need more focus. So as a case example, within the last few weeks, there was a county clerk who was caught on security cam footage entering a bipartisan secured ballot room. And by protocol, the protocol is good. It says that a member of each party needs to be together to access this secured room. And this clerk was caught on video accessing it alone. And so the protocol is solid, but we need to strengthen it with enforcement, and we need to strengthen it with clarity and education and training.
And again, what county are we talking about?
That would have been St. Joseph County.
Okay.
And I believe it was just today or yesterday that the Republican Party officially filed a lawsuit.
And what's the concern there?
The concern there is basic physical controls. So we have a room full of early votes for the primary, and we have a partisan county clerk who happens to be a Democrat, and the video shows this person, or appears to show this person, entering a secured room by herself when it is a bipartisan secured room. So there are two locks on the door, and the only way to access, or the only way that it should be accessed, is with one member of each party there to hold each other accountable. And that's a standard protocol. At a movie theater, one person sells you a ticket and one person takes your ticket. Standard accounting control called dual control. And it's a good protocol, it's a good design, except it isn't being used. So now the audit, a comprehensive top to bottom audit, a risk limiting audit, will look at that. It'll look at our secured facilities, it'll look at our people, our processes, and our protocols. And in addition, it'll look at everything digital, all of our cybersecurity, all of our technology, all of our hardware, and all of our software. That's what a true risk-limiting audit achieves.
Indiana historically has a very low voter turnout. As Secretary of State, would you tackle that issue? And if so, what if anything, would you do about it?
Sure. So getting people to participate in our nation, in our state, in our shared future, that's an important role of the Secretary of State's office, to be cheerleader, but also to be coach and to encourage that kind of participation. At the end of the day, voters want choice. When we go to a supermarket or a restaurant, we just want choices on our menu. Imagine a restaurant that only has one item on the menu and it's something that you hate to eat. How often would you go to that restaurant? So to encourage more voter participation, to have more real rewards for voters, we need more parties and more candidates and more options on their ballots. And if you build it, they will come.
Do you believe it is too easy to vote in Indiana or too difficult to vote in Indiana right now?
I believe we're at a Goldilocks level of voting. It's easy enough, but it's also difficult enough to discourage people who are using it for nefarious or with bad intentions. So it's easy. You can go online and register, or you could up until the 11th, and it's free to do so, of course. There's a good online portal, indianavoters.com. You can check your registration, you can update your registration, you can start your registration there. It is free to get a voter identification card from the Indiana BMV. It is clearly spelled out that there's no fee to get that ID document that you need to go vote. So most counties have voting centers as well as polling locations that are open for 12 hours on election day. We also have about a dozen different exemptions. So if you're working a poll worker, if you're out of state, if you're over 65, if you're in ill health, if you're military overseas, there are a number of exemptions that allow you to vote by mail. And so the exceptions should be the exceptions, not the rule. And I encourage all voters to vote in person on election day as the most secure form of voting.
Was Joe Biden fairly elected President of the United States in the 2020 election?
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate on why you feel that way? You don't have to, but give
Sure.
you the opportunity if you'd like to.
So yes, he was fairly elected, but yes, we have a problem because we can't prove that. Imagine, instead of the lottery system that we have now, you buy a lottery ticket. You don't get a ticket, you don't know your numbers. You don't know what the winning number is. All that you know is the lottery calls you and tells you you didn't win. Would you trust that? How would you follow up? You'd want to follow your lottery number, you'd want to follow your ticket. And that's the problem that we have our elections right now. We don't know what happened. We can't prove it to ourselves. And this is very reminiscent of 2008 and the credit default swap and the mortgage industry collapse, because we have a complex product where we have self-proclaimed experts telling us that they know everything and we know nothing, and that we can't see in. And when common sense people start asking questions, suddenly it doesn't make so much sense.
So are you suggesting that when folks go to the ballot box, you come away with a receipt that shows some identification number that can be tracked back, and me as a voter can somehow check to see that my vote was counted?
Correct. I'm advocating for a 3-point triangulated receipt. And with anything that's triangulated, it's strong, it's robust, it's redundant. So first is the digital vote that gets tabulated immediately for election night results. The second is a paper backup, or the original paper ballot. That way the government or the clerk has a copy of your vote on paper as a backup. And the third is a printed receipt that you keep. As I understand it, I'm the only candidate on your ballot who wants you to walk away with a printed piece of paper so that you can go home, go online, and track your vote just like a package. You can see that it was received, counted, and then audited. And yes, the receipt copy that you'll have will include a unique ballot number, as well as a secure code, like a 2-factor authentication code that you would get on your phone to verify your login. And it will include information about the vote in terms of the location, time, date, and place. It will not include your name, it will not include any of your personal identifying information, and it will not include whom you voted for.
How much would that cost, and who would foot the bill?
We don't have exact numbers on that yet. There are costs for VVPAT printers, which are rolling out now across the state. But we have to look at the cost from a couple different perspectives. Number one, in a state budget of $16 billion, there's always money to spend when we want to buy the things we want to buy. Number two, we have a state surplus of $6 billion. Number three, this is part of a good risk limiting and risk management plan. So any sophisticated organization has a risk management plan. We pay more than zero to protect us from downside risk. You and I probably pay, I know I pay auto insurance and homeowners insurance to protect me. So yes, that's more than zero, but it protects us. Look at the election of 2020. We had Texas and other states suing each other. Investing in receipts, investing in audits is the documentation that will, one, deter litigation, and two, exculpate us and defend us in court if it comes to that.
And I'm just going to go back to your answer. You said yes, but we can't prove it.
Correct.
So how do we know yes? It sounds like you're kind of wanting to have it both ways. You're wanting to raise concerns about it, but you're definitive that it was a fair election in 2020.
Yes, we have to. Yes, I accept the results. Yes, we have to move forward. But yes, we have to do better. Yes, we have to form a more perfect union. Yes, we have to have audits and receipts to make sure that we never have the concerns of 2020 again.
The Secretary of State's office obviously oversees a lot more than just elections and voter registration. Talk about, if you would, other areas of the Secretary of State's office that you feel you would be putting your attention toward, and areas where you feel you could make a difference as far as those other responsibilities that the Secretary of State has.
Sure. So there are 4 divisions of the Secretary of State's office: the Elections Division, as we've been discussing, the Business Services Division, the Auto Dealer Services Division, and the Securities Division. One of the areas that I think will take a lot of my attention and focus, and certainly my passion, is in the Business Services Division. Now, the Secretary of State is the 3rd highest constitutional office in the state, but as the title Secretary implies, it's largely administrative. So the Secretary of State licenses businesses into existence. Entrepreneurs, Hoosiers, innovators, those are the people who create businesses. I won't. But it's my responsibility to help them form their businesses, get them legalized, and formed so that they can build and grow from there. And there's a functional part of that office, but there's also a leadership component of it. And as Secretary of State, as a leader, I want to help our entrepreneur community. I've been an entrepreneur in my career. I've formed a VR tech company right here in Indiana. I was a customer of the Indiana Secretary of State's office in forming my LLC here. And so I know firsthand what it takes to start a business, and I want to streamline that process to make it easier to encourage our entrepreneurs to create businesses, create jobs, and create the innovations that are ultimately going to build their dreams and feed their families.
One of your challengers, Diego Morales, there have been many questions about his campaign and just questions in general. Do you have any comments? Do you have any questions? Do you have anything that you would like to say or question about some of these stories that are out there about one of your opponents?
These allegations are very serious, and he does need to come forward and answer them. I'm disappointed he didn't join us in the debate earlier this week, because that would have been a great vantage point from which to address many of these concerns. And that's perhaps the most concerning part to me, is that there's a refusal to debate. Looked around and saw other candidates who refused to debate, and as I pointed out in our debate, that healthy democracies require healthy debate, and there is a candidate, Vladimir Putin, who famously refused to debate, also said that he was too busy to debate, and that was multiple years and multiple election cycles. And so when we have any candidate who refuses to debate, the company they keep is Vladimir Putin. What future do we want for us as Americans, and for our nation and our state and our society, if our elected officials or candidates for elected office won't even come forward to address us? That's a grievous violation of the public trust.
Are there any allegations about you or your record that you would like to? I'm not aware of anything specific, I don't have anything written down, but anything that you would like to address, any questions you've heard raised about you?
I'm not aware of any allegations that I've heard, but I'm also ready to hear what you've got to say.
I'm putting that out there to each candidate, just in the event that there's anything you want to address. So I'm going to cut right to the chase here on the major cornerstone of your campaign, and that is Explain why you believe a statewide audit involving all 92 counties, why is that a good idea?
It's a good idea because it's a baseline. We need that to understand what's working and what's not. And from there, we can, again, take credit for the parts of our system that are working and work quickly to fix the parts that are not. Every time you turn on your car, you do an audit of the dashboard. You see how your systems are performing, and if there are any warning lights, you know to focus in and see what that issue may be. And right now, we're flying blind. We have no instrumentation, we don't know what's happening, and there is one report which is an ineffective audit report, but it is a post-election report. It is produced by VSTOP, the Voting Systems Technical Oversight Program. They are funded by taxpayer dollars and based out of Ball State. They answer to the Secretary of State. It is the closest thing that we have to any kind of audit of our elections. That report was completed for the 2020 elections, and it is still secret. I am not aware of anyone who has seen it, received it, or reviewed it. We are told that everything is perfect and that our elections are great. In grade school, we would complete a test and pass it to the student next to us, trade and grade. But VSTOP is grading themselves. There is an inherent conflict of interest. They have a twofold mandate to both certify and inspect machines and then to conduct this post-election audit. They are checking their own work and telling us they got a perfect score of 100. I want to believe them, but I also want to verify that.
How frequently would it be every election that all 92 counties have an audit? How frequent would this be? And again, have you been able to figure out what the cost would be for that?
Sure. So what I'm envisioning is a complete and independent audit of all 92 counties. And over time, yes, we could set that to rotate. So over a 4-year cycle, perhaps 1/4 of the counties are audited every year on a rotating basis. Right now, the audit that we have isn't even a random audit, so it's no kind of threat. But the audit that I am envisioning needs to be, at least initially, needs to be comprehensive baseline read of all 92 counties. A professional independent auditing firm, and there are many out there, accounting firms, all the hundreds of Wall Street publicly traded companies have audited financials that get produced once a quarter. The industry and capacity exist, the talent and expertise exist, we just need to hire and contract it here in Indiana for our elections. So if we have an outside independent auditing firm, even the Oscar vote count gets audited. So if we have an outside auditing firm come in and audit our elections, then what we can have are results that we can start to narrow in on and trust. And as experts, they'll help us scope the scale and size of the audit. How many random selections do we need to see in small counties like Switzerland County and in large counties like Marion County? How many people, how many staff will we need? How much time will it take? And what is the cost of it? So just like going to buy a hot air balloon, you don't necessarily know what you need to buy until you start asking questions.
So a few comments that you made during Monday night's debate that I wanted to follow up on. You mentioned a couple times red flashing warning signs that suggest that we have problems with our audits. When you mentioned those red flashing warning signs again, you said they suggest things are okay, but there are areas that we should tighten up. Help people understand what you mean by red flashing warning sign.
What do we have? We have a report that supposedly tells us our elections are performing perfectly. No one has seen it, no one has seen the details. That on its own is suspicious. Number two is we have clear protocols being violated where we have one single party accessing a secured ballot room or vote room with only one party present when there should be two parties present as part of standard bipartisan control as a security measure. We have software that we use in the state, namely Poll Chief, and the CEO was just arrested this week on criminal charges related to data breaches and using perhaps our poll workers and maybe even our voter registration data that is now on servers, found to have been on servers in China. We don't know the details of this, but again, it's an alarming concern that the data vulnerability exists. In Indiana, we have what's called a dead voter law, and what happens with that is, by law, if a voter votes early and then deceases before election day, the law requires that the county clerk go in and cancel that voter's vote. That on its own makes sense, and we're one of about 13 states that has that. However, how does the county clerk achieve that? For mail-in votes, it's pretty straightforward. The county clerk goes in, pulls the mailed-in vote, finds the carrier envelope with that voter's name, and then discards or destroys or sets aside that vote. But what about all the digital votes, electronic votes that happen before Election Day? And remember, in Indiana, the majority of all votes cast, more than 60%, are all cast digitally on direct record equipment, DREs, where there's no paper backup whatsoever. And in the Indiana Election Administrator's Manual, page 180, or document page 170, the instructions from the Secretary of State to county clerks this year to be used in 29 days requires and states in plain language that the county clerk shall go into the machine and there shall be a unique identifier number between the vote cast and the voter. So all early votes are not secret. That data exists connecting you with who you voted for. It's stored electronically and digitally somewhere. It's not clear how or where. And by law, it has to be deletable or cancelable. And it's not clear who has access besides the county clerk. It's not clear what audit trail is created in a deletion or a cancellation. And so these are all questions, red warning signs of vulnerabilities.
When you were asked if voter fraud is a concern in Indiana, you replied, voter fraud happens all the time. What evidence or proof do you have that voter fraud happens all the time in Indiana?
So to give another specific example, it's a little bit longer, didn't get into this in the debate. The Libertarian State Party chairman is Evan McMahon. He lives right downtown in Indianapolis on Washington Street. He owns his own home, and he has owned it for about 10 years. He happens to know the previous owners and who's lived there. He knows who lives in his home. And as state chair, he has access to certain registration data that you and I wouldn't have otherwise. And so out of curiosity, he went to look and see, well, who's registered at my address. And it turns out that there were about 11 registered voters for his family of 4. And troublingly, very concerning, is that he continues to receive mail for real ID documents for these people who have never existed, who have never lived at his home. And they are registered to vote. We don't know if they're voting, we don't know who they're voting for, but we know that there's a real disconnect between the voter roll and the actual people at this address. And if we extrapolate this out, there are a number of citizen action groups that are pursuing similar claims. They're going canvassing counties and they are getting affidavits. Now, whether these end up holding up in court, there's at least a consistent pattern of disconnect between people who are registered to vote and people who vote.
But you just said we don't know if these people have voted or not. I'm asking, do you have any concrete examples of voter fraud in Indiana?
In this case, those people, I don't know if they voted, but for the people who are collecting affidavits, and I understand they've canvassed dozens of counties, and I have not seen these myself, but I'm told that they have these affidavits, and these are affidavits of hundreds, if not thousands, of Hoosiers who say they did not vote or did not vote in this way.
So let me ask you again. Do you have evidence of actual voter fraud that has taken place in Indiana in a recent election?
I myself do not have that evidence in my possession.
And the reason that I'm pressing you on that is because, I mean, to say voter fraud happens all the time, there have been extensive, studies and examples of going out to try to figure out, is voter fraud as rampant and widespread as some people are saying? And inevitably, it comes back that there are some mistakes, but very, very few examples of actual fraud. So I just want you to understand why I'm asking that. And do you fear that then gives the impression that, oh, this happens all the time, when we don't have any evidence that it's happening all the time?
What I fear is complacency. I fear the delusion that everything's perfect and that we need to take no action. That's dangerous. We have militaries to keep vigilance. We need to keep vigilant and we need to keep proactive. And just as you would continue to improve the software on your phone or your computer to make it more secure, so too do we need to do that for our elections. We can't bury our heads in the sand and pretend that everything's okay. And we need to start with the best place that we can, which is the most recently conducted and concluded post-election report.
You mentioned a little while ago that candidates in recent elections both claim fraud and that did not accept results of elections when they lost. And you said during the debate, the way to dispel bad behavior is by conducting a full audit, shining sunlight into dark places. So after the 2020 election, several states did conduct statewide audits. Those audits upheld the election results. They showed very few, if any, signs of actual fraud that took place. And yet, after those extensive statewide audits took place, the same candidates who said that there was fraud and that they, were robbed of an election, they still claimed that they were robbed and should have won the election. So my question to you is, at a time when things are so polarized, nationwide and here in Indiana, what makes you think that a statewide audit would change anyone's mind and improve their confidence in the voting system?
Integrity never needs to hide. And an audit is integrity. It shows us what's working and what's not. We can take that as a starting point where we can all see. If you and I had a delicious tub of ice cream to share between us, you might say, cut and divide. You cut, I choose. And we agree to the process. We agree that we can both inspect it because we're both seeing it at the same time. But if you went to go cut it or divide it in a secret room and I didn't even know the size, the original size, then I might claim that that's unfair. So what we need to do is bring this out into the open so that way we can see the entirety of the process. We can
bring what out into the open?
Our elections process. We need to understand, talk about safety protocols. We need to talk about the software that we use. We need to talk about the safety measures that are built into it. We need to talk about the poll worker training and the clerk training and all of the things that go into.
Are those things hidden right now?
Are they accessible? Can you see the audit report?
You would like better transparency on how the audit was conducted? Is that what you're suggesting?
So not only better transparency about how the audit's conducted, but again, an independent and complete audit, and importantly, to do it before the elections are certified. So the HAVA, Help America Act vote of 2002 essentially mandates that federal positions are certified within 30 days, which accelerates the schedule for all of our local and state election offices too. And that puts a lot of pressure to certify the elections before we even know what happens. The post-election audit report that was performed by VSTOP ostensibly took months, and yet we needed to certify the elections before then. So the current process as it stands now is we sign off on a contract before we even read it. We don't know what's happened before we certify the elections, and that's a dangerous place to be.
And do you think that folks will eventually accept the results if there is a statewide audit? You think people will, or do you think there are still going to be those who are not going to buy into the results?
There will always be people who don't buy into the results, always people who believe that the earth is flat. But we'll have more people believing in the results, and what we need to do is de-escalate to, again, shine sunlight into dark places so that way conspiracy theories don't get bred. Where there's transparency and we push out opacity, we'll finally get to see the results and the trust in our elections. We need to de-escalate this so that we never have another January 6th.
My last question for you, and that is, help explain why voters should vote for you as opposed to the other Secretary of State candidates.
Whatever is important to you, whoever you vote for, go out and vote. I'm certainly grateful for your vote and your interest and your support, but at the end of the day, this is about you. So please go out and vote no matter what happens. And I am running on solutions. I'm an entrepreneur. I started this because I wanted to solve a problem for me and for my neighbors. I'm not doing this because I want to call names. I'm not doing it because I'm on some power trip. I'm not doing it because this is the 10th office I've run for. This is the first office I've run for, and I believe I can make a difference here. I'm doing it because I have solutions. Receipts and audits can bring trust, restore confidence, and bring us back to a place where we can agree to disagree as a civil and civilized society through our peaceful elections process and our peaceful transfer of power. At the end of the day, the most important message for me to the voters is if we can count our votes the way we count cash, we'll finally have the elections that we deserve.